everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we're going to be making something we've made before because today is a template tutorial and we will be walking through how to use Shop OklaRoots' latest templates, and these are the snack bag templates. So let me just quickly show you. The snack bags are so fun, so easy. I call them snack bags because we do use a food safe lining. But these are also just zip pouches. So this is the two-tone option. You can see we have a top panel and a bottom panel. And the biggest struggle that I've seen personally and also with other people who have messaged me is pattern placement for this, especially on this bottom panel right here, because it is a boxed bottom, meaning some of the image gets sucked up into the bottom. So if you try to center the design from top to bottom on the cut, it's not right. So what we did was we came up with some templates. This is just for the top and this is for the bottom. And the top is helpful, but not as helpful as the bottom, to be honest, because the bottom here, what we're gonna do, let me see if I can get rid of the glare. We have a little dashed line here, and that dashed line, that's your box, and this just shows you this is what's gonna be seen in the end. Here's the seam allowance on the side, here's the seam allowance up top, here's what's gonna be the bottom, and then this is what you have left. And that is really helpful when it comes to pattern placement. The same thing on this top one over here, we have just this box here, just kind of show you for the top of the bag, this is what you're going to see. And then we also offer a third one, which can be used for lining, or if you're just going to use a full panel. So for example, this is a snack bag here that does not have two-tone, it's just a full panel. However, I have this beautiful little quilt block, and I wanted to make sure the quilt block didn't get sucked in. And that's where this comes in right here, because here we have it labeled like that. We have the dashed line, we have the box bottom down here, so you know all this will be on the bottom, but anything in this window here will be seen. That just makes it a little bit easier if, again, you have a fun fabric or an embroidery design or a quilt block or anything like that, and you want to make sure that it doesn't get lost in the seams or in the bottom. So I will be walking you through these templates today. These are available on Shop OklaRoots. They do sell out pretty quickly, so if they're not available when you go to check, just make sure you're signed up to the OklaRoots email, and we will email you out as soon as they are restocked. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, anything at all, leave them down in the comment section. I'll have timestamps. This is a quick one. Many of you have already seen this tutorial multiple times. You know this is a favorite on the channel. But again, even though we've done it before, I do really want to show you how to use these templates for anybody who is interested. All right, guys, let's get started. All right, so here are all the bits I'll be working with today. I'll be using a waterproof canvas for the lining. I'll be using vinyl for the top and the bottom and the main panel. This is going to be kind of a hodgepodge because I want to show you how to use all these templates, but I'm only going to make one bag. So the front of the bag will have a top and a bottom, and the back of the bag will just have one panel, just so we can go over how to use this to align everything. And then the lining will just all be waterproof canvas. The cuts for all of this are down in the description. Remember, this is a completely free pattern. You do not need these templates at all to make this bag. You can just use a ruler. These are not necessary. These are just, especially if you're gonna be making quite a few of them. I know a lot of us are back to school. We've got kids going. If you're gonna be making a lot of these, the templates just help. They make it a little bit quicker and they make it a little bit more precise. And I mean, come on, they're pretty. So I have my waterproof canvas and my vinyl. I'm using vinyl for everything today just to save time because I don't have to interface it. Normally we would use a quilt weight cotton or cotton woven for the top panel because it's easier to attach to a zipper. And then we would use a vinyl for the bottom. I have my zipper here. This is 7.5 inches long. And then I have my bag tag. So let's start with the top and bottom pieces, and we'll use the main piece in just a moment. So, oh, this is such a mess of scraps, isn't it? Can I fit it on here? Nope. All right, so the bottom piece is gonna go with this taped vinyl, so I'm gonna put that over there. And the top piece is going to go with this. Now, what I'm gonna do is just look at my material. And this is actually really helpful if you have embroidery. We have some embroidered snack bags coming to the shop soon, and this is perfect for that. But if you have material like this and you're like, let's see, who do we want? Who do we want? These two. We love those two, right? I love the Guardians of the Galaxy guys. I don't know anybody's names. So this is going to show me where the center of my snack bag is. And then on the side here, I have it marked 3/8 inch seam allowance because that's how I sew it together on the sides. And on the bottom of the top panel, I have it marked 1/4 inch seam allowance because that's the seam allowance I use to attach the bottom and the top. I know that can be a little confusing. Just so you know, the template engravings might change in the future. We might just decide to remove the seam allowance on this so that you can decide on your own. But for now, that's what it is. I have the dashes marked as using a 3/8 inch seam allowance when attaching your zipper. However, I did not write that up here because you might prefer to use a 1/4 inch. So the top part here is just for the zipper, and it's not a big deal if it's a 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch. However, I did want you to know the sides and the bottom here. So let's see. So I can use these grid lines to just go right over my main design, and I can see what else is going to be in this. Looks great. Make sure it's straight. Very nice. And then I'm just going to grab a rotary cutter. And this is the nicest thing about acrylic templates is you don't have to trace them. If you don't want to, you can just grab your rotary cutter and rotary cut around it. And there we go. So let's move this out of the way now. And I have had some people ask about cleaning their templates if they are using like a Sharpie or something, which I never ever suggest you use a Sharpie with fabric. Just keep the Sharpie away from the sewing room. But if you're using some sort of a marker and your acrylic's getting dirty, the best way to clean that is with a microfiber cloth and just this alcohol. Okay, so we have the top panel. Now let's work on the bottom panel. And let's see. So the bottom panel, if I'm looking at this and I'm like, man, I want the song, I Want You Back, and then I center that and it's, you know, centered right in the middle or it's down here, I'm never going to see it. It's going to get sucked into the bottom of this. So what I want to do is make sure that it's in my window here. So I have my window and it will fit in there just perfectly. So I'm going to get it just the way I want. And now I'm going to use a rotary cutter for the big parts. And then for these box corners down here, I'm going to use a pen because I'll use scissors for that. So I'm just going to mark that with a pen. Now I can grab my scissors. And I'll just cut along those box corners. And there we go. Now I have that just the way I want it. And then this design right here should show up in the end when these are attached just like that. So that's the front panel. Now let's do the back panel. So for the back panel, I'm going to bring out this main... Oh, I hope I have enough. I might have to get a different piece of material actually. Oh, actually, I think I can use the little corner up here. So with this though, if I had more material, I could center this and say like, okay, I want her to be in the center. But I think what I want is I want to make sure I can include as many characters as possible. I think I want it to go just like that. That's perfect. So now once again, I'm just going to rotary cut around the long edges. Got all the long edges done, and then I can grab a marking tool and just trace these box corners. And then just use some scissors to cut those box corners out. Okay, perfect. So now I have my front and I have my back, and that was nice and easy, and I know everything's going to show up the way I want it to. Now I'm going to do my lining. So this also works very well for the lining. This is especially helpful if you want your box corners cut out ahead of time. In the tutorial, we do save the box corners for later, and we cut them out after we've sewn everything together, which I know can be a little difficult because then you're not quite sure where to stitch. When you box them, the thread unravels. If you've done it, you know what I'm talking about. I'll tell you, it is a little bit more slippery on the waterproof canvas, so be careful if you're using the rotary cutter. And then again, I'm just going to draw out this. So there's one lining panel, and I'm just going to repeat that process for the other lining panel. Okay, so now I have my 2 cuts of lining done, and while I'm here, whenever I'm making these pouches and I have a waterproof canvas lining, I also like to use that waterproof canvas for the zipper tabs. So for zipper tabs, I like to cut a piece of material that is 4 inches by 2 inches. And for that, I'm just going to use a regular ruler. Okay, so now I have my zipper tape, my bag tag, my zipper tab, my lining, my back, and my front panels. And I'm just going to put this all together. We've done this many times, but I will walk you through it again since we're already here. So I'm done with my templates. I'm just put those to the side, hang them up somewhere. They look nice. So first, let's build the front panel. So we're going to take the top panel and we're going to lay it right side down with the bottom panel. Remember that the boxed bottoms here, that's the bottom of the bottom panel. So don't try to attach it like this. Doesn't work. Let's do it this way. Right sides together. I'm going to grab some clips, and I'm not really going through thread and needles and all of that today because it really will depend on the material you're using. I will tell you though, with vinyl, I like to use Microtex 8012 needles, and I like to use a Tex 35 weight or a Tex 45 weight thread in my top needle, and I use a Gutermann thread from Joann's in my bobbin. So now I'm going to sew along this clipped edge here at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once you have these sewn together, I like to press the seam allowance to go behind the bottom panel. So I'm just going to finger press that since I have vinyl. So far everything's lining up right. And now I'm going to top stitch along this bottom panel, and it's going to hold the seam allowance behind it at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, so my front panel's done. I'm going to attach my bag tag to the back panel, and one thing to always do, it's good, is go ahead and find the midpoint marks on the top edges. You could also do the bottom if you'd like, but the top is really where you need it. Top edges of all 4 of your panels, your 2 lining panels and your 2 exterior panels. And then you can go ahead and find the midpoint mark on your zipper as well. That'll be helpful. So using that midpoint mark and a ruler, I'm just going to measure down about 1.5 inches, and that's where I'm going to put my bag tag. To help hold it in place, I like to use a piece of double-sided tape and attach it to the back of my tag, and then just center it on that grid mark that I'm using with my ruler. Here we go. So now I'm just going to top stitch my bag tag on at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so let's clean this up a little bit. We have our front panel, we have our back panel. Those are good to go. We have our lining, and now let's just do our zipper, get that all ready. So what I like to do is just fold my zipper tab. So I use this one piece for both of them. So I'm going to fold it. I never figure out which is the front and the back. I'm going to fold it wrong sides together once, give it a press. And then I'm going to open it up and fold those long raw edges up to meet that middle mark. Again, wrong sides together. I'm going to do this for both sides of the long edges. And then I'm going to fold the whole thing in half like a hot dog bun. And I like to grab clips to kind of hold it together. And then I'm going to grab my zipper tape, and I'm going to insert my zipper tape into one side, not into the center of this whole thing, just close to one side. It doesn't have to be right on the edge. And then I'm going to flip the other end up and insert that as well. And you should see you have plenty of excess on this. So this is just kind of like a quick way to do zipper tabs without having to cut individual pieces. So just make sure it's in there nice and flat. Rearrange your clips. There we go. And now I'm just going to top stitch along this bottom folded edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you have that sewn on, go ahead and trim down the excess zipper tab. So just going to go along like that, along the edge, and then trim it down. So the zipper tab should be the same width as the zipper tape now. All right, now we just have to build the bag, which we've done before. So let's grab the front panel and lay that right side up. I like the zipper to close to the left. If you don't care, then don't worry about this. But I like the zipper to close to the left, so I'm going to pull it like that. And I'm going to take my zipper tape and lay it right side down. And I'm going to match up the midpoint mark on the top of my front panel with the midpoint mark that I made on my zipper tape. Remember, front panel and zipper are right sides together. And just clip this in place. The zipper tape does not extend all the way to the edge. It's not supposed to. Alright, so I'm going to baste on this zipper tape at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And basting means it's just a longer stitch length. Once that's basted on, grab one of your lining panels and lay your lining panel right side down to the back of the zipper. And it should line up perfectly with your exterior panel. So clip this together along that top straight edge right by the zipper. And now I'm going to sew this at a 3/8 inch seam allowance because I am using a number 5 zipper, and that's just a good seam allowance for that. If you're more comfortable doing this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance, do that. Or if you're using a number 3 zipper, you might also want to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just whatever's comfortable for you. Now we're going to take the lining panel and flip it back. So I flip it up first and finger press it, and then flip it all the way back. And you might find it easier if you line up the bottom edges of your exterior panel and your lining panel and just kind of clip them together to hold it. Because what we're trying to do is top stitch along this edge by the zipper, and we want this to be as straight as possible. And I find clipping those materials together on the bottom does help with that. So I'm just going to finger press this. And now we're going to top stitch along this top edge here next to the zipper, but we're not going to top stitch off the sides. We're only going to top stitch where the zipper tape is. So I'm going to start right here at the end of my zipper tab. I'm going to go a couple stitches forward. I am going to back stitch, and then I'm going to go all the way down at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance until I reach the other end of my zipper tab. I'm not going off the edge here. Keeping it like this helps put the bag together in the next step. That's looking so cute. So let's attach the back the same way. Take your back panel and lay it right side up. take your zipper panel and lay the zipper right side down and match up the midpoint marks and clip together. And just check the sides here. The sides should line up on the same spot. It shouldn't be off-centered anywhere. Let's just clip this zipper to the back panel. And once again, we're going to baste along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alrighty, we have that in place. Take your remaining lining panel and lay it right side down to the back of your zipper and line it up with that top edge from the back panel. And now let's sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance or a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Whatever seam allowance you use to attach the other side of the zipper, use that same seam allowance here. Now we're going to take our lining, fold it up just like that. I like to finger press that first, and then fold the whole unit back. Zip up your zipper, it makes it easier. And then let's attach the bottom edges with just some clips. Again, it just helps straighten out the seam by the zipper. There we go. Now I'm going to kind of pull on it. I'm going to pull on this other edge as well. I'm trying to get this nice and flat and straight. That looks fantastic. All right, so just like we did on the other side, we're going to top stitch right next to the zipper. We're not going all the way to the edge. We're going to start and stop where the zipper tabs are, and we're going to back stitch at the beginning and the end. Alrighty. Next step is putting all this together. So make sure your zipper pull is in the center, not all the way to either end, because we don't want to accidentally sew over that zipper pull. Take your exterior panels and pull them up right sides together. And what's nice here is you can just match up those box corners. So this will save a little bit of time. There we go. Clip along the edges. I like to fold the seam towards the exterior because it's just a little easier. But you can also fold it towards the lining. I find a lot of people have their personal preference. So I'm just going to clip around the bottom and the sides of my exterior panels. All right, and now I'm going to pull the lining and do the same thing with the lining. I'm going to match up those box corners. And the nice thing about the templates, honestly, is that if you use them, especially with a rotary cutter, you're going to get some pretty precise pieces. It's not going to be off very much versus if you use a ruler. And if the lining gives you a little bit of trouble by the seam up here by the zipper, don't worry about it so much. That's not noticeable. The most important thing there is that we do just sew it together. All right, so on the bottom of the lining side, on this bottom panel here, I do want to mark about a, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to mark about a 5-inch opening. Since I'm using all vinyl, that's going to be pretty stiff turning it out. So I'm going to do a 5-inch opening centered on this bottom panel here of the lining. And still add some clips just to hold it together. Okay, so now on this lining bottom here, I'm going to sew this together at a 1/2 inch seam allowance, but I'm not going to sew between this marked line. I'm going to back stitch at these box corners. I'm going to back stitch at these marked lines. As I make my way up from the bottom of the lining, I'm going to sew at a 1/2 inch seam allowance right here, back stitch over the box corner area, and then I'm going to change my seam allowance as I'm sewing to a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I suggest using a zipper foot here because what we want, we can feel that zipper tab. You do not want to sew on top of that zipper tab. Besides it not being right for the bag, it will probably break your needle. So we want to get really close to that zipper tab without sewing on top of it. And a zipper foot is going to help you do that. Ideally, we want a 3/8 inch seam allowance. If it doesn't get that, that's okay. Just get as close as you can to the zipper tab. And then continue on the exterior at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Backstitch whenever you come across a box corner. 3/8 inch on the bottom as well. 3/8 inch on the other side. Once again, get as close to the zipper tab as you can without breaking anything. And then once we get to the lining, after you get past the zipper, you can increase it to a 1/2 inch seam allowance and make sure you backstitch at your box corners. I know that's a lot of information. Just remember, lining side 1/2 inch seam allowance, exterior side 3/8 inch seam allowance, zipper tabs as close as possible. Okay, so If you're using a thick vinyl, that is probably pretty tricky right here by the zipper. I know, it's tricky for me too. If you are using a really thick vinyl, you might want to go down the sides and the bottom edge of the exterior panel one more time with a stitching that's just outside of the original stitching, so just to the right or the left of it to reinforce it. My vinyl is not too thick, so I think I'll be okay. So now what we want to do is box these corners. So you might find it easier to open your zipper all the way in there. And I like to put my hand inside to do this. And we're going to pull apart the front and back panel and make the seams meet and go in opposite directions. So they're going to meet one another and they're going to hug each other and go in opposite directions. And the easiest way to box corners is to pull down further down. So if you're just trying to straighten this out right here, you're going to find that it keeps V-ing like this. But if you go down here and pull it, you're going to have a lot more luck getting that straight up top. Got to start at the bottom of the mountain, right, before you can get to the top of the mountain. I don't know. That might not be a good analogy. But here we go. So I'm adding clips to the bottom here as well, just to make sure that stays there. And then I'll add a clip to the boxed corner. Do the same thing on the other one. And just make sure whenever you're doing this bottom seam here that it goes in the same direction. Don't twist it so that the seam ends up twisting, because then your bag's going to be a little wobbly. So just keep it in the same direction. Pull down towards the bottom here to straighten out this little edge right here really well and clip it. All right, that looks great. Do the same thing with the lining, and the lining, depending on your material, the lining should be pretty easy. If you're using a lightweight material for your exterior, that also should not have given you much of a fight. Okay, so now I'm going to sew along all 4 of these box corners, just the raw edges, at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. It's all sewn together. We just need to turn it out. So just be gentle as you turn it out. And this is when we get to see if our placement worked. Reach in and poke out the boxed bottoms of the exterior. Looks good. And then for the tabs, you don't need to reach in between the lining and the exterior. Just reach into the main opening of the bag and just tuck your finger under there and pop out those tabs. It can be pretty thick sometimes. If you need to, you can always open up your lining. I do this a lot. And you can, if you have the room, you can trim down the seam a little bit. Mine's pretty tight already, so I'm gonna leave it. But you can trim down that seam a little bit, and it will help with this bulky corner right here. But really, you can just kind of massage it and get it to flatten out the way you want it. There we go. All right, let's take a look. So I've got my characters right here. They look great. I've got my tape that I wanted perfectly showing. It's not sucked into the bottom. This looks fantastic. So all we have to do now is close up the lining. So just pull the lining out. And then you can just kind of push your fingers into the corners here and fold down the material. Honestly, you can probably just pull on this bottom edge like that, and it'll straighten out. Don't have to measure, doesn't have to be perfect. You just want to make sure the raw edges are tucked in there. Add some clips. Looks good. And now let's top stitch along this clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, that's top stitch. Let's just push it back in the bag. Oh yeah, this looks so good, doesn't it? This is adorable. And everything looks good on the back. Everything looks good on the front. Yes. I hope you guys love these templates. Well, guys, what do you think? I know, you've seen this before. You've probably made this before, honestly. But what do you guys think of using the templates? I'd love to know. To be honest, when I did receive this request quite a while ago to create templates for this, and right off the bat, I was like, but it's just rectangles. You know, I didn't really get how useful it would be. But since working on the templates and practicing and using them and having some friends try them out and give me feedback on them, I have realized how helpful these really are. And we actually use these now in our own shop, especially if we're doing a design that has like an embroidery design on this top panel here. We use the templates just to make sure none of that design is going to be eaten up in the zipper or in the bottom bit here. I mean, You guys were right. This was a good idea. So let me know if you use these. Let me know if you're interested in them. We have lots of different options on the shop. We have a lot of different color options. Like I said, currently they are selling out pretty quickly because they are brand new. That's usually how it works. After a few rounds, we will keep restocking these. So after a few weeks, maybe a month or so, they'll probably be a lot more plentiful. Just give us time to restock them. I hope you guys enjoyed sewing with me today. If you try out the templates, please let me know down in the comments. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye, guys.